Great, good to be with you. I'm connecting to you from Suffolk, Felixstowe, probably one of the driest spots in the UK. We're almost the Dust Bowl of Europe, really, but it's one of the areas, one of the reasons that really appeals to me about living in Suffolk is the sunshine and the dryness. And I came to Suffolk in 1990 to come and be sales manager for Knockcuts Nurseries. The nursery doesn't exist anymore. It sort of closed down a couple of years after I left. In fact, as I've been reflecting upon that, I think 4 of the nurseries I worked for before don't exist anymore. So I'm not sure whether there's something to do with me working on a nursery or just the fact that it's challenging having a nursery. But I've spent my life in horticulture, principally in ornamental production, but have done quite a bit of consultancy and work with people in edibles and flowers and seasonal crop production. And since I left Knockcuts in 1994, I've been consulting and been working, around the UK, the Republic of Ireland, China, States, Poland, Czech. That's it really, I think, probably. But principally my passion is working with smaller enterprises, really, and particularly family-based enterprises, because I really like the dynamics and how people sort of handle that sort of challenge of working in a very intense business whilst living on the premises. So that's me. I've got a real, my sort of, if you like, my purpose in life is helping horticulturalists in need. And I'm doing that through consultancy, but also recently started developing a portfolio of teaching. And I teach at Kew on the Kew diploma, and been doing some teaching at Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania. I'm delighted to be working here with Tyfu Cymru. I think I said that right. Yeah, that's about the only word. Oh, Borodar. I know 2 words now. But delighted to be working with Tyfu Cymru, as it's a really interesting project. So thanks for your contribution today and coming along. That's really enough about me. You can look at my website if you want, but do feel free to ask questions. As there's only a few of us, you might just pipe up, and obviously, don't forget to unmute yourself and ask a question. But I will be asking you to put some questions in the chat function. So we're thinking about, how to make your business stand out from the crowd. And I've posed that question, why stand out from the crowd? And I think really, for me, I want to start this by thinking that we live in a VUCA world. Has anyone heard that phrase before? Okay, it's a really interesting phrase that defines the age we're living in, and it stands for the fact that we live in a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous market. I don't know if that feels like that to you, but certainly, from the global financial crisis onwards in 2008, through to COVID, now through to a war in Russia, I think we could probably all agree that we are living in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. I don't mean to start this presentation by talking about depressing stuff, but the reason why I'm excited about living in a VUCA world is that actually what happens is that a VUCA world creates opportunities. That, we live in that VUCA world, and my experience is that when times are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, it creates a huge amount of opportunities. So actually the real positivity is that actually I really feel that there are massive opportunities for us in horticulture, bigger than they've ever been before, to be honest. That's the optimism in me. But, in that VUCA world, we need our businesses to stand out from the crowd. And actually, you know, we operate in a dynamic and competitive market. Your competitors are going to change, and they're going to change fast. And that's, you know, how I term dynamism, really. We're operating in that really dynamic and competitive market. And in those environments, we've got to stand out from our competitors. And actually, you know, also helping you stand out from the crowd really helps you achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. And when I use the word sustainable here, I'm really talking about the fact that you can keep that competitive advantage going. You can sustain it. Don't confuse it with the eco term of sustainability. And really what we're looking to do in our businesses is to create that sustainable competitive advantage for our business, okay? That we remain competitive over the years. It does mean to say we need to change, of course, and respond to what the market is doing and to the actions of our competitors. But if we can stand out from the crowd, we should start to achieve the holy grail of a sustainable competitive advantage. But before we do that, to get our heads thinking and sort of thinking much more strategically, I really love this matrix. Has anyone seen this before? Okay, so it's called the Ansoff Matrix, A-N-S-O-F-F. I'm a big fan of Ansoff, and he created this strategy about how you might develop your market. And it's a very simple grid. So hopefully you can see my cursor. So Ansoff basically said, if you're going to grow your business, there's only 4 things that you can do. You can take your existing products and you can sell it to the existing market. And that's called market penetration. So for example, Mark and Julia, you know, if you are selling fresh produce to local farm shops, market penetration very simply means finding more farm shops to sell to. Does that make sense? Now that's a really easy strategy because we know there's a market and we know people like what you do. You just need to find more of the same types of customers. Ansoff then said, well, look, you know, another strategy is you could stay within the same market and you could develop new products and sell it to the same market. So Mark and Julia, using your example, you could be selling into the farm shop market, currently selling, you know, fresh veg, but let's say you now product development would be adding a completely different product in, let's say honey, for example. And that would be a product development, adding new products into your portfolio. Is that fairly clear? So with me, you know, my market is ornamental growers and edible growers, and my existing product is consultancy. I could perhaps add a new product in, such as online coaching, and we would call that a product development strategy. So that's cool, right? Then Ansoff then said, well, the other option you got is a market development strategy. So you could take your existing products and find a new market for it. So again, Mark and Julia, taking your situation, you could take fresh produce, and instead of, in addition to selling it to farm shops, you could sell it, let's say, to the local school. That's called market development. So with me, I could take consultancy and I could start selling it to the agricultural sector. Then Ansoff said, the 4th strategy we could develop is diversification. In other words, we could get new products and take them entirely to a new market. Okay? Now that's quite challenging. My wife, my son and I diversified slightly because he and I bought a sandwich shop together. So for me, it was a completely new product and a completely new market. I bought it for his benefit. So that was, you could say I was doing a diversification strategy. So Mark and Julia, you might have diversified. You might have been doing something different in a previous life. Have you? Sorry, you need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I suppose so, because we were originally just growing fruit and veg, but we now do hogget and pork.
Okay, so yeah, I think that probably is diversification. I mean, thank you for that. What's really interesting is that if we look at the risk associated with these strategies, market penetration is low risk, product development is medium risk, market development is medium risk, and if you want a roller coaster of a ride, then diversification is the one, because that's the high risk. That's the one that's exciting. That's the one that sets me alight. That's the one my wife wishes I wouldn't do. So she's probably listening to this in the next room. Okay. So in other words, to summarize it, market penetration, existing product, existing market, product development, existing market, new product, market development, existing product, new market, and diversification is new product, new market. So, I mean, I love that matrix. I mean, Sarah and you folks working at Tyfu, how could you develop that, use that matrix to develop your business, your organization? Any thoughts? Which quadrant would appeal?
We have just set up some e-learning, which I think would go into this, maybe.
So that's product development then, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, you could do market penetration, couldn't you? Finding more of the same types of people to, deliver your services to.
Diversification is part of this program. We're, trying to highlight opportunities to our growers.
Okay, cool. Does that make sense, that matrix? It's pretty cool, but I do get excited by these things. So sorry for my enthusiasm over over a mundane piece of academic work. So rather than put this in the chat function, perhaps Mark and Julia, going back to that strategy, which ones do you think you've adopted?
I think the diversification, because going from just purely horticultural, with fruit and veg, it was quite a learning curve going into livestock.
Yeah.
It was a really fast learning curve as well. So we're in our second year of that now. We've also added goats, and we should be getting a few more soon when the kids are born.
But I think we might look at we might be thinking about the market development as well, because we've been selling to a few local shops, but we are considering either like a mobile farm shop, or maybe a veg box scheme, or a different way of delivering goods. So
I've also I've started running courses as well in no dig gardening.
So that's product development, then perhaps you could say. I think it's really good. What's interesting though is that my particular view is that I don't believe that companies should engage in all four strategies at the same time, because I think it can weaken one's focus. So I would say, great that you're thinking it through, but be careful of trying to do every single strategy at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the health warning for you. Okay, so we're thinking about sustainable competitive advantage, and standing out from the crowd will help you deliver that. So sustainable competitive advantage is a company assets, things that you own, They might be tangible, like a piece of field, polythene tunnel, might be goodwill, which is intangible, attributes or abilities that are difficult to duplicate or exceed, and provide a superior or favorable long-term position over competitors. So that's a really interesting point here, is about we as businesses need to get things that are difficult to duplicate by our competitors or exceed. So, you know, if I think about what I've got that's difficult to duplicate, and I suppose maybe it's age of, you know, 45 years of having worked in horticulture, that's actually quite difficult to duplicate, isn't it? Because, you know, it's a fact. So I think that's one of the competitive advantages I have, really. What do you think Haylin, what do you think your competitive advantage at Tyfu might be?
Our competitive advantage at Tyfu would be our support from Lantra, a land-based training organisation, and the team and their connections.
Yeah, so that's difficult to duplicate, isn't it, or copy?
Mm.
Mark and Julia, any ideas what you think, you know, your sort of the things that you've got that are difficult to duplicate?
I don't know, stubbornness perhaps. we're gonna do it no matter what. I think one of the things is, see, we don't try to compete with the people that we can't compete with, is something that we always say, which is why we do a rare breed lamb and we grow it on to hog it, because not many people are doing that, and it's an awesome product. So we don't need to compete with, you know, the likes of Tesco or anybody like that.
Right.
You know, it's a specialist market, and it's the same with the pork. You know, we're doing pasture raised pork. You can't buy that in a supermarket. So and that goes with it, pretty much everything we grow. Our tomatoes, we don't do money maker tomatoes. We do heritage tomatoes, heritage carrots. So I think that's what it is. It's having knowledge of heritage things.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think you're capturing the zeitgeist there, which is cool. Okay, thanks for contributing there. Another piece of work that was done on competitive strategy and helping you stand out from the crowd was done by Michael Porter, who was a professor at Harvard Business School. I've become a big fan of Michael Porter. Don't know if you guys have heard of him, but really probably the leading expert and thinker on how to compete in a dynamic marketplace. And Porter really said that these are the 4 strategies you can use to compete: cost leadership, cost focus, differentiation leadership, and differentiation focus. And through the rest of this webinar, we're going to concentrate on differentiation leadership and differentiation focus. But has anyone seen these strategies before? Okay, they're really worth, you know, if you want to spend a bit of time reading about Michael Porter, read his stuff on competitive strategy. Let's dig into what they mean. So cost leadership is the cheapest producer of a particular product or commodity. It's really difficult to deploy this strategy because, you know, owners and managers in that business have constantly got to be working on reducing costs at every level to remain competitive. You know, it is a strategy that works, but it's about constant cost reduction. Can anyone think of an example of a company that might have this as their strategy?
Aldi.
Bang on. I'd say Aldi and Lidl. You know, absolutely. You know, they're totally driving down costs all the time. You know, not just the cost of the food they're buying for reselling, but, you know, staff costs, etc. And they don't spend much on watering their plants outside the front, do they? But there you go. Don't get me started on that one. I don't think cost leadership is a particularly sustainable strategy. We've then got cost focus, and those are organizations that strive to build a lesser cost advantage, but only within a particular market segment. So Aldi or Lidl are across the whole sort of, grocery market. You could argue that cost focus means being, a very low cost farm shop, in a particular market segment. Then we've got differentiation leadership. I've got to say, this is my favorite. This is where you're seeking to be unique in your industry along some dimensions that are widely valued by buyers. And it can be several dimensions. It can be quality, it can be service, it won't be price, it might be the uniqueness of the product. And so differentiation focus, which is my strategy, so I'm seeking differentiation in our target segment. So my segment is ornamental horticulture, and I'm seeking to differentiate myself from my competitors within that target focus, in that target segment. And I'm really, I suppose, differentiating myself in a variety of ways, in terms of my experience and perhaps in terms of my personality. That's how I differentiate myself. So differentiation leadership and differentiation focus are the two strategies that will help our business stand out from the crowd. So thinking about it, Mark and Julia, do you think your strategy that you are evolving, do you think it's differentiation focus?
I think so. I think it's because we're looking at the things that we don't have to compete against. The things we know there are a specialist market out there, or niche market, and that's what we're working towards, because we're very small scale.
Yeah.
Everything we do has to have a good sell price at the end.
Yeah.
We don't sell cheap pork or cheap lamb or cheap tomatoes. They do cost more, but then we're not selling to the people who are going to buy meat from Aldi. Yeah. They're never going to buy from us, so it's not worth us trying to get them to buy from us. That's never going to happen.
I think that's a good point. Certainly, from what little I know of you, I would have put you in that differentiation focus box, I would say, and I think that's a great strategy to have. What I would say is that Porter, when he first developed this thinking, used to refer it as a niche strategy. And that's a term that we're all familiar with, and I often say to people, is there a market in the niche? Sorry, is there a niche in the market? But then I ask them, is there a market in the niche? In other words, is that niche big enough for you to develop a sustainably profitable business? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, when I left Knockcuts, I found there was a niche in the market for my services, and there is a market in the niche. It's big enough to provide me with a sustainably profitable business. But several years ago, my wife and I toyed with the idea of emigrating to New Zealand. We'd been 4 times anyway, and she'd been there a year before she met me. So we met with the immigration people, and they said the best way to get to New Zealand was to go on a long-term business visa. So in 2012, in May, I booked a 2-week flight to New Zealand, stopping off at Singapore by myself in a car. Happy days. Had a great time driving around horticultural enterprises. And yes, there was a niche in the market for my services, but there wasn't a market in the niche. It just wasn't big enough. Does that make sense, what I've just said? It's so you've got, is the market big enough for your niche? Okay. So I'm going to show you now an example of a company that is standing out from the crowd, because it's an example of a company that really stands out from the crowd. Are any of you familiar with Southwest Airlines in the States? Okay, they're a low-cost airline, and you can imagine the low-cost airline business is incredibly competitive. Have a look at that. Have a look at that video, and it will show you how they are standing out from the crowd. Sorry, that didn't show up. I don't know why that didn't, but okay, now let me just move you on to here now.
I've just put that link in the chat for everyone if they want to look at it
thank you.
after.
Well, thanks very much. It really is worth having a look at. It's a very amusing video, but it shows you how the company are standing out from the crowd. It's interesting. You wouldn't think that McDonald's are a company that stands out from the crowd. This happened to be McDonald's in New Zealand, in Tauranga, where they've made a restaurant in a DC3. The guy there on the left is my son, who's legging it to the McDonald's, because he was rather keen on McDonald's at the time. But that is a way of using your infrastructure and standing out from the crowd to get yourself noticed. This was again in New Zealand, and this was Woodland Park, which is a tourist attraction with accommodation, and taking a Bristol freighter and making it into a hotel, standing out from the crowd. To give a more horticultural theme, I don't know if any of you have been here, Cowes Garden Centre up near Newcastle Airport. Has anyone been there? If you get over that part of the country, it really is worth a visit. For 10 years in a row, Cowes have won the best plant area in the UK as judged by the Garden Centre Association. They stand out from the crowd in terms of quality and presentation. I mean, that's spectacular, really. So, in other words, they're differentiating their business. This company has differentiated their business by, having unique accommodation. McDonald's have differentiated their business in New Zealand by having unique premises. And then Southwest Airlines are differentiating their business by having rather unique and interesting staff or characters. Florida Flowers is a great case study in Washington State in the USA, of a small flower company differentiating their business on style, if you like, and presentation. Really, really cool company. And also, this image of having the cat is a great way of, standing out from the crowd and showing you that, particularly if you're a small family business, showing you that you are, approachable, if you like, because people love pictures of cats, don't they? So let's discuss differentiation now as a way to stand out from the crowd. So the first one I'd say, so we're going to look at 10 ways. And I would say that we need to turn the received wisdom on its head. The received wisdom in business says that employees are your greatest cost. And if you look at most horticultural businesses, when I ask people what's their biggest cost, they'll say staff. But we need to really turn that on its head and see that employees are your greatest asset. Mark and Julie, do you have employees?
Not yet.
just us. Yeah, we have woofers.
Woofers, excellent. But there'll come a point when you will get employees, won't there?
Yeah.
And then we need to move into that sense that they're going to be our greatest asset. And I really, love them or hate them, I'm a particularly big fan of Richard Branson, because, we often have that phrase saying, customers are the most important people in the business. Richard Branson says they're not. It's the staff that are most important people in the business. Because if you get your staff right, they're going to deliver exceptionally good customer care. So it's really interesting how Richard Branson flips that received wisdom on its head, which I rather like. So, you know, the first way to stand out from the crowd is seeing your employees as your greatest asset. So we're going to see them as the most important people in the business. And again, Branson says, train them well so they can leave. In other words, what you've done is you've looked after them and you've trained them so well that they've now got new skills so they can go off and get another job. But he says, look after them so well they don't want to leave. And I think that's a really interesting concept of how to look at, you know, developing people. Train them so well that they can leave, but look after them so well that they don't want to leave. And, you know, often when I'm working with people and talking about people development and managerial development, I say that one of the good indications that you've developed as a manager is your job doesn't exist anymore because you've trained the people below you to do your job. So, love what Richard Branson says on that. I mean, the second way to stand out is to provide really legendary customer service. And I don't, you know, so we've got to treat customers like royalty, if you like. And what's really interesting is that Forbes stated that it costs 5 times more to attract a new customer than it does to retain an existing one. And we often in business get obsessed about wanting new customers. Now, you do have to get new customers because some of your customers are going to die or they're going to leave the area. But, you know, I would say let's get focused on keeping our customers and, you know, really treating them like royalty. Interesting phrase there. I mean, this is really interesting. A recent study showed 96% of customers were not complaining, and 91% will simply never return. That's a frightening statistic, don't you think? Really quite a worrying statistic. This is even more worrying. A dissatisfied customer will tell between 9 and 15 people about their experience. Around 13% of dissatisfied customers tell more than 20 people. Anyone got any comments on that one? Mark and Julie, what do you think? Johnny?
We tend to get on really well with our customers. It's more of a friendship.
Good.
So we welcome people in, and yeah, we're very friendly with our customers.
Okay, nice. And that's great. And I think really to provide legendary customer service, it's quite good to sort of identify legendary customer service in other examples, you know, or other cultures. I think in 2010, I took some clients of mine to Boston or to Massachusetts to look at retailers there. They ran a garden center, but I took them to look at other retailers. And my goodness, it was mind-blowing how the level of service with my clients was so poor, even though they thought it was great, when you contrasted it with what was on offer in America. So challenge yourself, meet other companies, see how they provide legendary customer service. I really like this one. If you want to stand out from the company, if you want your company to stand out, then I understanding the customer lifetime value. So you take the average pound purchase, this one is dollar because it's an American slide, sorry. You times it by the number of customer purchases per year. You times that by the average length of the customer relationship in years. And the customer lifetime value is the amount that they might be worth to you over the years. Does that make sense as a little, okay, so for 3 minutes, while I just nip out the room, can you have a quick go, Mark and Julia, on doing that little calculation? Is it fairly clear? So you can think about what is the average purchase price in one transaction. How many purchases will that customer make in a year? What's the average length of that relationship in years with your business? What figure have you got then?
Go on, Joe.
Well, we've said like a joint of meat for £20. Say somebody buys one a month, so 12 months, 12 purchases a year, and say they're a customer for 10 years. That gives you 2,400.
That's a fantastic figure. That's really good.
We would hope they would buy
Hopefully
more
they'd
than
be there
that,
for
but
10 years.
we just picked 8 products. But
Of
yeah.
course. So of course I mean, the important thing for doing this this calculation is to remind ourselves that you know, the actual value to our business in terms of pounds, shillings, and pence, if you like, of that customer value, and you know, which then gives us extra incentive to really drive legendary customer service, to keep that person, and of course to increase that customer lifetime value. I was at a business last week in Scotland, a garden retail, and their customer lifetime value was 44,000. That's a phenomenal amount, isn't it? Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
Yeah. So the fourth way to stand out is to come up with something new. And, you know, just, sorry, I keep giving you stories about my past, but, you know, when you've been hanging around for 45 years in horticulture, you come up with a lot of stories. When I was at Knot Cuts, we used to exhibit once a year at a trade show. And, you know, every single question all the buyers would come on to is, what's new this year? There's that insatiable appetite for something new. And your customers want new stuff. So it's about keep reinventing products, packaging, ways of buying, service levels, and the quality. Now, I'm not sure how you can keep reinventing meat. Sorry about that, but you know, but you could reinvent the packaging, of course. You could.
We could just bring out a new recipe every year.
yeah, exactly. Or you could do that recipe pack, couldn't you? Of course.
Yeah,
you know?
we do find it difficult to introduce new products because I think it's just a British thing. People don't like to try new things. You know, if you take the average person who goes out for a curry, they will have the same curry every time they go out because they know they like it. They don't want to spend however much money on something they might not like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, often though, in that's the case, we have to hook people in with tasters, don't we?
Yeah.
And teasers,
Yeah.
which is often the way. That's really interesting. I'm amused about that example, Mark, because every time I go out for a curry, I just never order off the menu. I just ask them to choose for me, and it's quite an interesting experience. But you get the idea. It's about coming up with something new, really. The other thing, I'm sure you guys are doing this, the other thing to help you stand out from the crowd is embrace corporate social responsibility. That's a real buzzword that is not going to go away. But, you know, the real thinking now is not only should we be taking care of our staff, our customers, other stakeholders in the business, but we should be giving back to society as well. You know, that thought that the business can be a force for good. And there's a real growing movement there. So, you know, if we think about, you know, what are those areas of corporate social responsibility? You know, it's about the workplace. What can we do in the workplace to give back? Can we provide mental health support, for example? Can we make those working hours, you know, agreeable to people that have perhaps challenging lifestyles? It's about giving back to the environment, having those green initiatives. It's about building community and also perhaps getting involved in social issues. I came across, you know, quite a few years ago, a guy called Richard, who was chairman of the UK's first, the oldest football club, which was Sheffield FC. And he really understood his role about corporate social responsibility and was doing a huge amount of work on social issues in football. particularly in Africa. And I think, as we're, as business leaders like us, business people involved in society, it's about really thinking about how we can embrace corporate social responsibility. I mean, is there, I'm sure you're doing this, Mark and Julie, but is there something in the community that, you could be doing that might, embrace corporate social responsibility, but help you stand out?
I'm not sure about doing anything in the community at the moment because we're fairly new to the area. We're just getting to know the community. But with regard to, you were saying about your workforce, now we use a lot of volunteers.
Yeah.
And then we make sure that they have a really good time when they're working with us. It's not just about, I've heard horror stories of woofers, and that they'll turn up at a host and there's 10 other woofers and they work from 8 in the morning till 5 at night, and it's like a workshop, a proper machine.
Right.
We don't do that. We've got a woofer with us at the moment. Julia took her down the beach yesterday, and we take her out and make them feel really, really welcome.
Nice.
And they want to come back, and they tend to work really well for us, and they know that they're going to go out and spread the word about us, so they'll give us a really good review on Woof UK. So yeah, but I mean, we're the same with our customers. We like to treat our customers as well and make sure they feel really, really welcome when they come to us.
Good. You're almost selling it to me to come and do some woofing with you.
Well, I think you should.
Yeah, I think I should actually.
You'll find out what some real work's like. And we're in Carmarthenshire, so bring your raincoat and wellies.
I did go and help a friend of mine who's got a sheep farm up in Scotland, lamb. I did lambing for him most through Easter weekend. Oh, that was brutal, but there you go. The other thing which really helps your business stand out from the crowd is do a blog. People love blogs, and it's a great way of sharing ideas, getting your voice heard, and really talking about your story. It takes time, of course, and time to write, time to build up, but it's a great way of standing out. The other thing is we have to mention this, of course, if we want to stand out, is to build that strong online presence. Fascinating, isn't it, that Chatmeter said 97% of consumers find local businesses online first. I think it's really interesting. And that is really about building that strong online presence. I think, I've got a fairly strong online presence. I'm not blogging, but I do feel that, the work I do myself on social media and stuff has really helped grow my business. So it does work, it pays off. Reward customer loyalty. Now, often we have loyalty programs. I'm a bit cynical about loyalty programs because you don't get a lot out, really, a lot back from them. But, are there ways that you can reward customers? 83% of customers, again, according to Chatmeter, say loyalty programs make them more likely to keep doing business with a company. So I think it's a really interesting statistic, but it's about thinking about how might you reward customer loyalty. Now, I think probably a good idea is to move away from that sort of loyalty card points program. But I mean, Mark and Julie, do you have any thoughts about how you might reward customer loyalty?
We tend to, if we have regular customers, we tend to round down the price on something. If you do it just a couple of pence, we buy our feed for our animals from they're a very small business, a family-run business, and if it's, I don't know, if it's £52.60, they'll say, oh, we'll call it £52. It's only 60p, but it just makes you feel like, oh, well, that's cool. They just knocked off 60p, or they knocked off a pound or whatever. To them, it's only a tiny fraction of their profit, and they know that we're going to come back and buy it off of them again. And we do it with our customers. We just literally just round it down. It also helps that we don't end up with pockets full of change as well.
Yeah.
It's a couple of pence. It's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
It's not going to break the bank, but it just makes them feel a little bit like, oh, thanks, that's brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So think about other ways that you might reward customer loyalty as well. But that's great. Thank you. And I think number 9 is do business differently from your competitors. So, you know, it's finding out where the holes are in your competitor's business and set yourself apart from them. That sounds a weird thing to say, but you know, it is about thinking, what are your competitors doing badly? And that's where there's a real great opportunity to start really then, you know, doing what they do badly, but do it so well. And I think that's a great way of grabbing business away from a competitor. And number 10, which is a really interesting concept, is be aware of the product life cycle. You'll stand out if you constantly have new products or reinventing them. Has anyone seen this product life cycle before? Okay, it's a really interesting tool to describe what happens with products. So up this axis here, we've got sales, and then along this axis, we've got time. So what happens is so products classically go through this life cycle, as do industries as well. So we introduce a new product and sales are quite slow over the time. Then we move into the growth period where we get a rapid upsurge in sales. Then the sales are starting to slow down and they're going to peak. And we're then in this block called maturity. And what happens is after maturity, the product goes into decline. Okay. Now, the real skill then is to know when your product is at maturity and how we can do this thing called product extension. So give an example. So none of you are going to remember this, but in the 60s, when you were ill, my mother would go and get a bottle of Lucozade from the local supermarket. And that Lucozade bottle was a glass bottle, about a litre, and it had orange cellophane round it. Do you remember that? Okay. All right, you're not as old as I thought then. Okay. And now what happened is that we all thought that Lucozade was a product for when you were ill. Okay. And what was happening, of course, is sales were at maturity. So what they did, which is genius, they took the same product, Lucozade, put it in a fancy plastic bottle with some great branding, called it a sports drink, and stopped that decline in sales. Does that make sense? Kit Kat did the same thing. Do you know how they did it? Any idea how they did that product extension? Anyone know? Sarah, do you know?
The 2 instead of the 4.
Yeah, but another one.
White chocolate.
Kit Kat
Chunky. Yeah. Right. So here's the thing. What you've got to understand is if you think about all your products, they're going to be at different stages. So when you've got products that decline, you've got to have products coming through at maturity. And then when you've got products at maturity, you've got to have them coming through in growth. And then you've also got to be introducing new products. So all your products will fit into this growth curve. So Mark and Julia, where is the lamb on that growth curve?
I think we're probably at the end of introduction and the beginning of growth at the moment. Right. People are just starting to hear about our land. We've just started, like I say, we're fairly fresh to this. So we're selling locally in the village at the moment, and people are starting to buy off us. And right. When we bump into them, have you got any more of that pork left? Have you got any more of that lamb left?
Okay. So that's great, but so you need to be aware when it's coming into maturity and what can you do to extend the life of that product, but also you need other products coming in at introduction stage.
We'll have goat coming in soon.
Excellent, great. Okay, that's really good. Okay. So in other words, so standing out from the crowd really means having that unique selling proposition, a USP, a unique selling proposition. And it is that factor that makes your business different from others out there. And it makes you stand out in the marketplace. So, you know, we look at, you know, it's that combination of the passion you have, the strengths that you have, and the market needs. Okay. And to develop that in the middle in that Venn diagram is our unique selling proposition, which builds on our strengths, builds on our passion, and meets a need in the market. And often when I talk about this, I think, well, what might be my unique selling proposition? And really, I suppose, I think my unique selling proposition comes down to my passion for the horticultural industry. You know, I'm 62. I'm not planning to retire and want to keep going as long as I can. But I think, what does that passion, how does it relate to a USP? I suppose, well, give you an example. Yesterday, on a Sunday, throughout the day, I had 3 separate conversations with the same client as they're trying to sort out an issue. Now, they know they could have spoken to me last night at midnight on a Sunday night if they wanted to, because I've got a passion for helping people. I love it. And so I think that's my USP, you know. But of course, it's only a USP if there are people out there that value it. So tell me, people, what do you think your USP is, your unique selling proposition?
Most probably the fact that we're sort of fully fund training, whereas stuff, you know, like Farming Connect is only partially funded.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Hayley, were you going to mention something else?
I was thinking, I'm glad Johnny answered.
Sorry. Don't worry, I'll put you on the spot there. Mark and Julie, what do you think your USP might be then?
I think it's the same. I think it's the passion.
Yeah.
We want to grow the best food in Wales, and I think we do, actually. And we make sure we tell everyone about it as well. So.
Well, it's great. And what's really important about that is that passion is difficult to copy, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and it's an incredibly attractive quality in a business. It's an incredibly attractive quality in a person, you know. Great. So I have to say every company must have a USP, got to be valued by your customers. And then, of course, the USP, you don't have it for life. It has to change subject to the actions of your competitors. So if someone down the road opens up, Mark and Julie, offering the same quality with the same passion, then you've got to develop a new USP. So it's an evolving thing that one needs to be thinking about quite a lot. So actually, we're just about on time, but I've got another question. So to summarize, it is about differentiating our business if we're going to stand out from the crowd. Remember, we can differentiate on a variety of elements, on our people, on our facilities, on our product, on our service, on our quality. I'm a bit nervous about talking about differentiating on quality because I think quality is a given these days. But so make sure we look at how we differentiate. I think really also it's about understanding what your customers value. So that's about getting to know your customers, you know, engaging in a conversation with them. It is then about developing and maintaining a USP. And I suppose really, you know, I've written it down 3 times, you know, if we're going to stand out from the crowd, it does mean that we're going to need to be changing quite frequently, changing what we offer, changing the way we do things, and being, embracing change is a great way of standing out from the crowd. So I've put down here any questions, but I suppose before we do that, you might just have a quick think about what, perhaps Mark and Julie, what are you going to do differently as a result of attending this webinar? Could you maybe just have a chat amongst yourselves, perhaps come back to us with an answer in just a mo?
I don't think we're really going to do much different, because I think you've pretty much covered a lot of what we were thinking anyway.
Good.
So
has it
more focusing in on certain things.
Right.
We do have a tendency to be jacks of all trade, and this is something we learned over the last several years. We don't need to sell 20 varieties of tomatoes and half a dozen varieties of carrots. We just need a couple of varieties and do them really, really well.
That's a really interesting point, because what you're saying to the customers is we've chosen the best of varieties for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we can't compete with the big boys, so
no.
And we clearly understand that, and we're not looking for customers that want that cheap product.
Yeah. And I think you made a really interesting point, because producers, people like you and I, we get obsessed thinking we've got to be putting in range all the time, and choice. But I don't think we do. I think we need to simplify, but grow it to such a high standard and choose the best varieties that, what you can say to your customers, to Mrs. Miggins is, we've chosen the best 3 tomato varieties for you and grown them to a high standard. You don't need any others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, if you haven't got them, you're better off without them. That's the way to phrase it, I think.
Yeah.
But there is a danger, of course, a bit like we talked about that Ansoff Matrix, in engaging in every single strategy. So it is about focusing on those profitable areas, really. And any other thoughts? I hope today has confirmed that perhaps you're doing some of the right things.
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think the focus is the big takeaway for this. We really need to narrow in on what we're trying to achieve. Well, we're quite lucky in the fact that what we do, our customers want, because our customers are looking for what we're selling. It's ethically produced food, it's environmentally friendly. We help with biodiversity, all that kind of thing. We do permaculture.
But being local as well, so many people have said, can't buy local vegetables. I mean, we're surrounded by countryside, and people are saying we can't buy locally grown food.
I mean, we talked about being in a VUCA world and how this is creating opportunities for us. Never before has there been a greater opportunity to really promote that locally grown seasonal veg close to your doorstep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that's going on in Ukraine at the moment has shown how fragile food security is.
Exactly.
And we're going to be seeing pretty steep rises in the price of food. So,
and with Brexit as well.
And with Brexit as well. So, it's a pain in the ass for everyone else, but for producers, I think it'll be all right for producers.
I think you're right. And we've got a really interesting message. I think that all of us need to be getting out there is about talking about eating seasonally, really, isn't it? Because we do not need Monge 2 from Kenya, do we?
No, and we don't need tomatoes in January.
No, but in a sense, we've got to give people the skills to learn how they can process tomatoes so they can eat them from their freezer or from a jar in January, don't we?
We're still eating ours from last year.
We do that. We turn it into chutney, and we sell the chutney.
Brilliant. Now, do you guys have any questions before we sign off? Thank you. I've asked you loads of questions. I'm sorry, but I like to engage people in conversation.
No, it's been good. Thank you.
That's all right.
What have you got for tea?
Oh, sure, tea.
beetroot patties.
We're a bit meated out. We've just eaten so much meat lately, it's just ridiculous. So, our diet consists of just like pork, lamb, sausages,
Really?
duck eggs. I'm not complaining, it's fantastic.
Maybe I should come and take a look, because I love looking at producers like yourselves. Whereabouts are you? Where's your nearest town?
Carmarthen. It was, well, Llandilo, perhaps. We're in between Carmarthen and Llandilo. Yeah, you're welcome to come down. Come and have a visit, definitely.
Thank you, Mark and Julia, for participating so well and filling the gaps. And thank you very much, and thanks, Neville, for such an informative webinar. Sorry that the turnout wasn't what we expected, but it's been a great session. You'll notice in the chat box there's just a short survey. We'd be really grateful if you could complete that for us. Just gives us a good indication to what else we should be putting on, so that would be great. And just some dates for your diary. We've got a digital marketing session, just making the most of shows and fairs and farmers markets, etc. That's on April the 5th, and a peat-free webinar, understanding how to grow successfully and manage the peat-free alternatives, and that's on the 7th of April. And that just leaves me to say thank you once again.